There is basically nothing in the literary culture of modernity and even post-modernity that haven't already been present in Don Quixote, which makes this book the first and simultaneously the last novel. Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert de Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. Let's talk about Don Quixote, the book I mean. And before we proceed, let's start with a name, because, you know, it's kind of a comedy. Well, arguably you may call it a tragic comedy or something to that effect. And many comedies contain, you know, like speaking names, like a last name which has actually some meaning. So I was curious to like learn what people think about the name Don Quixote, because it's kind of a weird name. I mean, at least to our ears. Maybe it wasn't such in early 17th century Spain. But it's still kind of weird, so I've read it up a little bit on the internet, and people think that, like, the best opinion I saw is that it comes from the word Quixote, which literally means, I mean, it's spelled slightly differently with a J, which basically means cuisse, this piece of armor, you know, that covers your thigh. So, and the suffix ote kind of means enlargement, right? So Quixote would mean something like the thighest, you know, or something to that effect. Now, perhaps I mean, since it indicates some piece of armor, so it would indicate some sort of a knight ship kind of a thing. But perhaps there is also, I mean, this enlargement suffix is comical, and also maybe there is some wordplay, like some idiomatic expression hidden here, which we are not aware of because, well, I don't know about you, but I don't speak Spanish, let alone, you know, this old style of Spanish. So I have no idea what it could have meant. Maybe there is some idiomatic expression meaning something like a fool or something, which is connected to the thigh. I don't know, actually. And also, in some versions of Spanish, I've read, it should have been read as Quixote, right? Or something to that effect. Which also kind of meant that this person, the main character, is kind of an older character with respect to the newer era, right? Which is also part of the plot, if you think about it. But I still had my own hypothesis about this name, which I haven't seen anywhere else. So, like this literary culture of let's say Renaissance and early modernity even, like if you look at earliest scientists like Galileo or Kepler, for example, it's been big on anagrams, and specifically Latin anagrams. So I thought, like, what if Don Quixote is actually a Latin anagram? And the best, like, deciphering of it that I could come up with would be quid ex noto, which means kind of like, well, it's kind of weird to translate it, so it's going to be lengthy, something like what follows from the notes. You know, quid means kind of what, or what follows, and ex noto means from the notes, quite obviously, or what follows from what is already known, you know, which kind of makes sense if you think about it, right? So, because the main character is literally based on the previous notes, you know, the previous literature. Like, he's a fan of the previous literature. So, maybe that was the idea of Cervantes. I don't know. Perhaps, there are some other connotations or allusions which we also miss. Alright. And then also I thought about this evil sorcerer that is present in the book, Malambruno, you know, which kind of makes sense if you think about, like, how do we decipher this? I mean, assuming there is any point in this name in the first place, like, mal is a pretty, you know, frequent prefix, I guess, or a root even, which means bad, right? Like, it's something bad, it's suffering, etc. For example, maledictio means curse, right? It's bad speaking, literally. So Malambruno, maybe it means bad Bruno, right? Because Giordano Bruno was actually burnt in Rome just 5 years before the book was published. In 1600, Bruno was burnt, and the book was published in 1605. By the way, watch my video about Copernicus, where I mentioned Bruno as well. I'm gonna link all of this in the description. Speaking about Mal, I have my own sort of personal anecdote. Like, whenever you're flying to Milano in Italy, you know, the Milan airport is literally called Malpensa, which literally means bad thoughts. And I was always weirded out by it, because why would you name your airport Bad Thoughts? You know, it's not like people who are flying already not having enough bad thoughts in the first place, you know, like, people are superstitious, you know, it's almost like an invitation for some sort of disaster to happen or something like this. It's kind of comical, actually. And by the way, right now, it also bears the name, since 2024, the same airport, of Silvio Berlusconi, which was another funny character of, actually nowadays, alright? But I mean, at least he was from Milan, in the first place, so it's kind of understandable why. And he was the prime minister for the longest. But he wasn't a good guy. He was also a mal kind of guy, you know? Anyways. Let me foreshadow the main point of this video. Like, I feel like our introduction have been way too long here. So the main idea of this video is that Don Quixote, the book, its biggest paradox is that it is simultaneously both the first, I mean, it's frequently called the first modern novel or the first novel period. So the biggest paradox is that it's simultaneously actually the first novel and also simultaneously the last novel. And actually in two different distinct senses. So let's explore this a little bit. Well, first of all, kind of referencing my own videos of my recent videos, I would claim that Don Quixote was actually the guy who has achieved almost perfection in this, what I call the dramatization of the mundane, right? See my video, Magic in the Small Things, as I call it. Almost, again, to comical degrees, which, again, makes Don Quixote sort of a tragedy/comedy, alright? So, why do I mean that it is the last? It is because, well, I mean, why is it the first? Well, because it was like the biggest book printing hit ever in fiction, at least for a long time. And it's still one of the most read books, maybe the most read book after the Bible, perhaps, in the world, actually. I mean, if we're talking about fiction, I mean, okay, let's not start this discussion whether the Bible is a fiction or Quran, for example. But yeah, let's put it this way, like, it's in the top 5, like, for sure, of the most read books in the world, perhaps even top 3. Anyway, why is it also the last book? It's because it's a product, quite obviously actually, it's a product of a really advanced society which we can only understand and fully appreciate now, like in this present age of hyperinformation and the age of essentially digital world. Or virtual world, essentially. So, from the modern point of view, like, who is Don Quixote? And here I will use a brilliant insight from Russian philosopher Galkovsky. So he says that essentially Don Quixote is a LARPer. And in case you don't know what LARP is, it's live action role play. So Don Quixote is essentially a role-playing gamer, or in general a video gamer, if you wish. So it's a person with serious game addiction, I mean, / reading addiction back in the day, right? Who kind of completely lost it. So it's a role player who took the game way too seriously, took the fictional world for the real one, you might say. Yeah, and literally the whole culture, so only now, let's try to summarize what I was meaning by all of this, is that only now in this much later stage where everything is much more developed, we can finally understand what Don Quixote meant, right? It was the final piece of this longer book culture, which we are actually mostly unaware of, but we'll talk about this in a minute. Whereas today we are also sort of, I mean, it always feels like it's the end, you know, watch my video about is the Western world coming to an end. So we can appreciate all these previous epochs and we can virtualize all of this and role play all of this, right? This is what I'm talking about. And this all is contained in Don Quixote, right? Paradoxically, like 4 centuries ago, it was all already written. Like it's going to happen right now, okay? So literally the whole culture of escapism is shown in this first novel ever, right? And even the modern entities, if you think about pretty much anything, like think about the movie Avatar, right? It has the same idea where it's just a retelling of the same old story. Like, the guy in real life is a cripple, but in a virtual world, in the game world, he's like this super cool blue alien with supernatural abilities and like exploring this fantastic world, right? Isn't this Don Quixote? It's essentially a remake of Don Quixote, isn't it? Right? And if you remember the plot of Avatar, like, the guy wanted to stay in this virtual world. It's a guy with a game addiction. It's a Don Quixote, essentially. So yeah. But a much poorer, arguably, and much flatter one in terms of the narrative. And again, we'll talk about this in a minute, because Don Quixote is wiser as a book, alright? Somehow, than Avatar. I mean, it's not very hard to be wiser than Avatar, alright? So we arrive at this picture of doubling of the world, if you know what I mean, where the dried abstracts of things, like the virtual copies of things, or simulacre, as the French postmodernists called it, right? The Baudrillard and people like that. So these dried abstracts of things become more real than the real things. It's a concept called hyperreality. I have much older video about this as well, so you may watch it if you wish. So the abstracts of things look much real than the real things themselves, right? This is the Don Quixote situation. Or you may think about this also as an example of augmented reality. Like, think about the appropriate media today, like Pokemon Go or something. This is also Don Quixote, essentially, right? Like, you see where I'm going with this? It's the first and the last novel. It's the epitome. It's the concentrate of this escapism that the civilization of modernity is essentially based on. At least it's culturally, okay? So yeah, it is at the same time the first novel, though. It's published in 1605, and simultaneously the last novel. So we've talked about this already, like how it sort of encapsulates all the culture of modernity fundamentally, but it also is based on what? On this, well, supposedly the culture of books of chivalry, right? Which Don Quixote himself reads. But the problem is, we don't know anything about these books. We don't have these books themselves. So it's like the last example of a culture that we know nothing about. And that's a kind of a big problem. All right. So there have been a book reading culture developed well enough that Don Quixote as a parody would be so successful, right? And it would be so successful that it surpassed the originals, you know? And we know nothing about the originals, but we know well enough about the parody. And like this Spanish culture of roughly 16th, 17th century is a mystery to us. I mean, how much is it Spanish even? It's hard to say, all right? But regardless, another example of the same sort of lost culture would be Velázquez's Venus. Venus by Velázquez. I'm not even sure I can show it to you. I mean, it's a painting on the screen because it contains nudity, but at least I'll link it, the wiki page or something in the description, because it's like, again, it's a work of genius, and it says everything about the nude nature that you can say, really, in a painting. In just this one painting, alright? Like, if you think about this, if you analyze what is shown there, it's not just the naked body. There's also a mirror with a face, but the face is sort of, you know, not really visible. And what is it? It's basically a metaphor for the soul, right? That the duality of a human being, blah, blah, blah. Like, you can write a whole philosophical book about this painting. That's how complex it is, and that's how masterful it is, right? In every respect, actually. So, yeah, and we know nothing about this lost Spanish culture. So, big problem, right? This culture is, at best, defamed and slandered by future epochs, by the propaganda of the historians of, I don't know, again, 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. And at worst, it's just completely forgotten. And the only things we have are just a couple of those small hints at it, such as Cervantes' book or Velázquez's painting, and a few others as well. And I've already mentioned parody, so imagine, like, again, apparently, according to me, alright, according to this sort of reasoning, there have been a really well-developed book reading culture in Spain or Mediterranean in general, maybe also including France or maybe other places like this, basically former Roman Empire, where people have been really thinking a lot, apparently, right? In at least what we call today 15th and 16th centuries, right? And Don Quixote is just a parody on top of all of this. And like it looked like, at least it kind of looks like from the book itself, like it's just one of the many, right? But only this book survives, all right? So that's the only thing we can judge with. The other things that we have lost, basically. That was my idea. But returning to the whole situation of how the original is lost and only the parody remains. So imagine if a person have never seen Star Trek, but they watch Galaxy Quest. You know, like Star Trek doesn't survive for future generations, and the new generations only watched Galaxy Quest, right? This is the situation we're dealing with. The original is lost, but we are left with a parody. But by the way, Galaxy Quest, I mean, if you ask me, it's much better than Star Trek, actually. Just like, perhaps, I don't know, since we've lost the original, maybe Don Quixote is actually deeper and better than the originals that it was based upon, right? I mean, at least, some people deemed it, important enough to save, right? So it was saved, and originals weren't, okay? Like the whole culture was erased, essentially, from history, but Don Quixote remained. Or, imagine if a person haven't seen Star Wars, but have seen something like Spaceballs, right? It's the same situation. And here we are returning to this point, which I think I've discussed in some video, like, I don't know, half a year ago, or maybe 2 years ago even, where the idea is that parody is the ultimate development of something. You know, when something has become familiar to everyone, so now we can all kind of relax and have fun about it, you know? We can all relax and laugh about it, you know, kind of like in a comedy stand-up or something, they have to talk about something that is familiar to everyone, or at least that everyone can imagine, you know, because that's how you get the comical effect. Everyone can relate and everyone is involved, and that's why if you have watched Star Wars, you can be involved with a parody. Otherwise, I mean, you wouldn't care, right? If you're not interested in Star Wars in the first place. But then again, I would argue that a good parody is a good piece regardless of, you know, whether you know the original or not. Hence this phenomenon of Don Quixote. Hence this phenomenon of Galaxy Quest, if you wish. Again, highly recommend it if you haven't seen. I think it's on my top 5 movies list, definitely. It's just a great movie on its own, even without Star Trek. So yeah, and much deeper, by the way. And it has also Don Quixote vibes, a lot. Like, sort of meta-narrative, breaking the fourth wall, sort of post-modernistic Don Quixote vibes, alright? Yeah. And arguably, actually, in many classical pieces, there are also allusions, there are also quotations, citations, explicit or not, and parodies, explicit or not, of the things we are not aware of even, right? It's actually like the whole culture is full of this, right? Oftentimes the original is being lost and we're only left with a parody or a quotation, citation, you know, things like that, allusion. So yeah. And here, in case of Don Quixote, returning to the main issue, we're dealing not with just parody, but a parody plus a reflection upon it. Again, returning to this issue of post-modernistic kind of thinking. If you wish, Don Quixote is postmodernistic already in itself. Like, again, it's breaking the fourth wall. It's doing all these kinds of interesting things. Like, the author actually says, okay, I took half of these stories from the archives. I took half of these stories from, again, supposedly, like we don't really know, fictional, like Arabic writer, this Sidi Hamete Benengeli, like whoever this is. All right. So it's kind of like, it's already telling us that there's some sort of play happening, right? Or maybe it's legit. Again, we don't know. Maybe it's actually a legit story. That would be a funny effect. Again, watch Galaxy Quest for this sort of occurrence. So the second book of Don Quixote, which was published in 1615 already, like 10 years after the first book, like it contains mentions of the books about Don Quixote made by copycats, like, I don't know the other word, like the people who made falsified books like the Adventures of Don Quixote and published them, even though it wasn't the original Don Quixote. Okay, so here we're also encountering this idea of like franchising, if you wish, the intellectual property, like where only the real author can actually talk about the hero they've created, blah 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 blah. Like it's so deep. There's so much to talk about here. You can see, hopefully. So in the book itself, in the book 2, people are reading of Don Quixote's adventures, even though the false ones, you know, right during the next Don Quixote's adventures, right inside these next adventures, alright? So as a fictional character in the book about Don Quixote is also a fictional character in the book about Don Quixote, within the book about Don Quixote. Okay? So it's like this infinite tunnel of mirrors. Like, you know, if you put two mirrors right next to each other, you get this sort of infinite set of reflections, etc. So yeah, and obviously, not only is it postmodernistic in its structure, if you wish, and the way it's narrated, it's also has many of these famous memes, like fighting windmills, for example. Like it's an actual expression, even though it's from the book, right? Or, I mean, arguably many cultural issues which are absolutely modern, meaning like nowadays they're happening. They're also happening in Don Quixote 400 years ago, like treating whores as princesses, you know? Like the simping culture, you may say, it was predicted by Cervantes, right? This is unintentional revival of Quixotry in the present day. Or the whole culture of anime, where people are going crazy because they've read too much anime, etc. Hikikomori, you know, people like that. So yeah, I'll watch my video about anime, by the way, it is a reverse cargo cult, as I call it. And I have another anecdote about Voltaire, of all people, the French philosopher and writer. Like, it's not related directly to Don Quixote, but it's too good for me not to mention. So, there was a guy, I mean, it all happens in France in 18th century, okay? Voltaire has a castle. He's a rich guy. He actually acquired his money through some machinations with lotteries, but he's also famous beyond that. Like, he's a good writer, like legitimately, etc. He's a philosopher, like all the kings want to be his friends, etc., etc. So one guy comes to him as a guest, and he stays for way too long, like maybe a couple of months. And Voltaire, you know, with his French wit, like he becomes irritated, and he approaches the guy and says, okay, my friend, like, I mean, his idea was that maybe maybe you should leave already, okay? But he formulated it in a different manner. He said, my dear friend, you know, the difference between you and Don Quixote is such that Don Quixote treated every inn as a castle, but you, my friend, are treating every castle like an inn. I think it was brilliant. Okay. So let's return to Don Quixote proper. So in modernity, the role of art seemed to be kind of relegated to just that, you know, to providing the means of escapism, right? And Don Quixote is exactly about that. That's where we're talking about Don Quixote being both the first and simultaneously the last novel. It contains all the novels in it, if you wish. It's the meta-novel. It's the novel about novels, while also being a novel about novels, like, even in its plot, you know? So it's so deep, actually. It's crazy. It's crazy how good this book is. So reality is crude, and it is described by science, you know, in modernity, where God is dead, and all the gods, plural, are dead too, and people have turned into these, you know, voters, or consumers, or this, third word that I haven't come up with, but I have to insert because you have to do it in threes, you know, etc., etc., you know. So all the stuff that elevates an individual becomes fictionalized, you know. So you can only enjoy all the cool stuff while being explicitly told that all of this is not true, essentially. So in reality, you're just a slave in modernity, I mean, to forces far beyond your control. Forces like economics, forces like politics, forces like history itself. And what Quixote does is rebels against this, right? So he says the world is actually full of magic, regardless of what you, a person brainwashed by modernity, may think, okay? Yeah. And I believe, again, returning to the issue of being the last novel, is that we completely misunderstand the Dark Ages, you know, the time between the fall of Rome and the rise of Spanish Empire. So the fall of Rome in roughly 3rd century AD, and the rise of Spanish Empire in roughly 16th century, maybe even 17th century, right? So there's how much? Like 1300 years, which is just a big hole in history. And we have no idea what happens there. And I was thinking about making a video specifically about this, because I've been thinking about this for the last couple of months. And again, I've watched a lot of Galkovsky, who talks a lot about this, and I have some ideas of my own, but some of the ideas of my own are so radical that, again, I may be forced to put this video to Patreon in the first place, so I'm still thinking, like, can I actually make it viewable on YouTube? or can I not? We'll see, I'll think about this some more. There is some plane right behind my back right now, flying. They're making a rehearsals of this big military parade on May 9th. I'm recording this on May 7th, in case you're wondering. So, yeah. Should have stopped by now. Well, still hear it a little bit. Anyway, so we completely misunderstand these Dark Ages, you know. If something like Don Quixote emerges as basically the last survivor of it, the culture of Spain, or whatever you may call Spain, of 16th and 17th century, like, what the hell happened in this big hole between Rome and Spain, we don't really know, okay? And that's a big problem. I would call it the main problem of history, in fact. All right, let's talk about a couple of things more, and then we'll wrap it up. So one thing is that is explored in Don Quixote, which again is very important for the culture of modernity, is the subjectivity and relativity of truth, and like moral relativism in general. Cognitive relativism, if you wish. So one person sees windmills, another sees evil giants, right? One person sees ineffective electric production, another sees religious shrines. I'm referring to my own short video about green energy. I'll link it in the description. You may watch it if you wish. And why did I remember the windmills, like the wind turbines specifically? I've recently watched a video, the man who killed Don Quixote, from 2019 by Terry Gilliam. So there's nothing special about the movie itself. It's just a retelling of the same story of Don Quixote, even though a very good retelling, if you ask me. Like, it's modern in its spirit, okay? So the story of Don Quixote is told there from sort of modern lenses, but it's very good, and I can recommend it, all right? And I think Jonathan Pryce is actually the best fit for the role of Quixote himself. But why did I remember this movie? Is because specifically it talks about the electric grid. Like, in the beginning of the movie, they mention the electric grid twice or even 3 times, all right? And it was kind of weird for me, and it was doubly weird because I've watched it literally on the day, or maybe the day after. It was like a week ago or something, after the Spanish blackout of the late April of 2025. Like, in case you're watching this video like 2 or 3 years later, or maybe 20 or 30 years later after it was made, well, there you go. There was a big blackout. The electricity went off in all of Spain pretty much in late April of 2025. Yeah. So it's kind of, I mean, Spain, the winter, and many people are blaming this towards, you know, these wind turbines and green energy specifically. That's why I remember this. Referring to windmills. Yeah. Speaking about, again, the novel, right? The status of Don Quixote is the first or the last or both novel of modernity. So Milan Kundera, the Czech writer, actually has, well, like a book of essays called The Art of the Novel. It was published in 1986. And in this book, he talks about Cervantes a little bit and about Don Quixote. Like, he says that the art, again, in modernity have been exploring well, what Eugene the philosopher, called the world of meaning, okay? Obviously Kundera didn't name it like this, but that's what he meant, at least that's how I've read it, okay? Basically, the novel was supposed to explore the world of spirituality, as opposed to the world of physics, you know, which was, the science's job was to explore the world of physics. Whereas the novel, this big literature, big narratives, they were supposed to explore this world of spirituality, the world of meaning, as I call it, alright? The world of being, as an existentialist would have called it, perhaps. So yeah. So Kundera's idea is that the novel is a cognitive tool, essentially. Its job is to illuminate this inner spiritual world of a human. Yeah. Just like the job of science is to illuminate the external world of nature. So in this sense, a novel has to be cosmopolitical. It has to be universal, just like science is, okay? And again, returning to my terms, I would say that the novel, therefore, must be the story, not the message. Referring to my old video, The Medium is the Message now, where I say that the story is something that is supposed to unite people, supposed to be universal, and the message is something that is supposed to divide people. And nowadays, like this, well, our modern culture, I would abstain from any political tags here. Just our modern culture is infused with this idea of separation, of political messaging, right? Of the message, as I call it. Of division, essentially. I'm for this guy, the other guy is bad, right? This is what I'm talking about. I'm for this idea, this other idea is bad. This is the message. Whereas the story is supposed to unite people. And in this terminology, a novel should contain a story, not a message, okay? That's what I was meaning here. And since now everything is the message, as I claimed in this video of mine, novel is dead, alright? So there's nothing describing the inner world of a human being anymore. There are no contemporary novels, okay? Not even in other forms, like the TV series or, again, movies. Like if you think about something approximating the last, well, again, television novel, if you may call it that, it would be, I don't even know what it would have been. Maybe Friends, you know, the sitcom. Maybe that would be like the last thing that could have, you know, unite people everywhere pretty much. But then again, it's not even all the people. It's just the, you know, like middle class sort of people and young people as well, right? So there probably was never an example of such thing in the TV media. Like, I don't know. I haven't thought about this actually. Like, maybe you may name some examples. Well, there you go. The comments are open. So yeah, since now, everything is the message. So there is no place for a story. Again, there are some examples of stories, or at least an attempt of building a story. Like, one of the examples is Megalopolis movie. I've made a video about this specifically. Watch it if you wish, where I describe it. But again, this movie completely, you know, it didn't make it in terms of box office, and understandably so, right? So since now everything is a message, the novel is dead, just like science is dead. So we have nothing illuminating our inner world. We have nothing illuminating the outer world anymore, right? So modernity is dead. Like, modernity gave birth to both the novel and science, and now both the novel and science is dead, which means that modernity itself is dead, right? Yeah. So we're returning to this old narrative of modernity ending, even post-modernity ending. Yeah. But speaking of both modernity and post-modernity, I actually think this would be a good note to finish this video on. I'll just repeat what the main idea of this video was, is that Don Quixote essentially is simultaneously the first novel and also the last novel. It's like both the last novel of this absolutely forgotten culture of book reading, which we know nothing about. You know, this, roughly speaking, Spanish culture of, let's say, 16th, 17th century. actually more like 15th and 16th, right? It emerges as just a parody of this old culture. But simultaneously, it starts the modernity. And in modernity, it also becomes the first novel, and also the last, because the whole culture of novel as the main artistic medium of narration in modernity, and also, oh my God, like, the sentence was so long, I've forgotten the beginning already when I was thinking about how should I end it. So, it's the first and the last novel in modernity itself, because it encapsulates the whole culture of escapism that modernity is characterized by. Something like that, okay? Let's just end with this. So to conclude this rant, there is basically nothing in the literary culture of modernity and even post-modernity that haven't already been present in Don Quixote, which makes this book the first and simultaneously the last novel. Thank you for watching. The eons are closing.
If you wish to support me, please consider joining my Patreon. That is patreon.com/philosopher. See the link in the description. Or if you have a scientific theory of your own and you'd like my help in developing it, please join my alternative science coaching program, also available through Patreon.